There's a there is a book that's been published. It's just been published by Sophia Institute Press. It's called Abuses in Religious Life and Path to Healing. And it's by the Carthusian General, Superior General, Father Dismas de Lassus. And there's been a review written here in Crisis magazine, which I thought I'd read through. Now, this topic is very timely and is extremely important. We've seen several movements, religious groups in the church that have suffered from spiritual abuse, which is different from physical or sexual abuse. This is abuse of the mind. And when I did my video about Kiko Arguello, while I admire him, I kind of see the traits of spiritual abuse in the way that he is treating his movement with the siege mentality. And it's even mentioned here in the review. And it's not that I have any animosity against Kiko Arguello or the Neocatecumena movement. I just believe that as a church, we need the whole church, our bishops, everybody, in order to give us a proper grounded spiritual formation that doesn't you go either end, too liberal or too extreme. And it's really important. I mean, anybody going into a consecrated life, a community where you're going to take vows, you need to be reading these types of books before you go in, and you need to have good discussions on what is happening in your communities, okay? Because otherwise you risk being brainwashed. Simple as. And I speak from experience. I speak from experience in this area. So I'm just going to read through Adam Lucas here in Crisis Magazine. He's written this review, and I'm just going to read it out because I do just think that, this needs more discussion in the church. Spiritual abuse at the heart of the church. In a new book, the Superior General of the Carthusian faces up to abuses in religious life and gives insights that have wide application to the entire abuse crisis. I'm increasingly happy to even read a good book as my life turns to parenthood, so it's not often I get to write a book review, and almost never that I write an unprompted one. But once in a while, there comes a book that deserves to be better known, and Dom Dismas de Lassus, Abuses in the Religious Life and Path to Healing, fits the bill. The Superior General of the Carthusians faces up to abuses in religious life, the very heart of the church, and gives insights that have wide application to the entire abuse crisis still haunting our Catholic life. But the book is not really about sexual abuse crisis. In that way, it is refreshing amid endless commentary and analysis of the causes and legal ramifications of priestly abuse of minors, or the disappointing responses to the likes of McCarrick and Rupnik. Father Dismas is only talking about the abuse scandal by implication. Instead, he writes as a pastor and superior, focusing on spiritual and practical dimensions of abuse, particularly as it happens in religious communities. The French title of the author's language tells us better than the English translation might imply. Risque dérivé de la vie religieuse. Literally, risks and abuses of religious life. Sexual abuse without prejudice is particularly hellish dimensions unique to it, is mostly a subset of spiritual abuse more generally conceived. For too long, the church hasn't recognized this spiritual abuse, which equates to psychological murder. And as somebody that has suffered this, I can relate to this book. And breeds environments in which more explicit sexual and physical abuses take place, and I would say could take place. Not always happens, but it could. But it is spiritual abuse that the church should be most apt to deal with, since the solution lies in her long tradition and experiential wisdom of the human community. Father Dismas relates various ways religious houses can fall into apparent sect-like behaviour, which we might call a toxic or cultish environment. Since these unhealthy cultures thrive on extremism, very important people understand that, very important, consecrated life is particularly susceptible as an essentially extreme or all-in mode of life. This is the risk inherent in monasticism, and these institutions need a hard-learned balanced offer by long traditions of canon law and religious constitutions. Very important, and oversight in the church. Spiritual abuse and the forging of unhealthy environment can happen in 6 broad ways: from the negative influence of superiors and failures of the institution, from toxicity and isolation within the community, from loss of contact with the outside world, I experienced that firsthand, and relationships, from misunderstandings of what obedience requires, I experienced that, from unhealthy ideas of asceticism and renunciation, and from abuses of conscience in spiritual companionship. I experienced all of this, most of this, firsthand. These failures happen in traditional and charismatic communities, and this is what people need to understand. I mean, there is this notion in the Catholic world that in a traditional community, nothing bad can happen if you're saying traditional Latin Mass. I mean, Catholics have fallen into the heresy that I put on a beretta and a traditional and I dress like a priest, look like a priest, and know Latin backwards, and can say the traditional Latin Mass, and that nothing bad can happen, and I can quote the Council of Trent end to end, and nothing bad can happen in my community. You really need to be reading this book. And I speak more to the traditional side. The charismatic side always gets a lot of focus. And for example, we saw in the Diocese of Toulon, we saw Father Coelho, who was an ex-legionary of Christ with me. And, you know, he really went off the deep end with spiritual abuse. And he got caught up in that. And we need to know the signs, because they infect any type of community where you see extremism, polarization, don't talk to the other church. You have to step back and say, okay, what is going on here? I can't recommend that people actually think this through. And I think it is, and the church has to recognize it now. This is the area that needs more focus on the church. And this is why you need the church. This is why we need bishops. Sometimes it's good to have a bishop that doesn't agree with you. And I'll tell you why. Because sometimes he needs to be that advocate that is going to put stoppers in your way, that's going to examine things a different way. It's going to challenge you a different way. And that's why we need the church. That's why we need the church. And that's why when Pope Francis issued that change that you can't found a community without getting permission from Rome, so bishops can't found communities now without getting a second opinion from Rome, that's good. That is actually something very healthy in the church. If it's from God, if something is from God, you know, having a second opinion will be something healthy. And God will work with that. And I'm just going off, just making people aware why this book is so important. Anyway, these failures can happen in traditional and charismatic communities, in lay associations and clerical orders, and even in their way in parish and family life. All of these upset the equilibrium needed for human person to flourish both spiritually and naturally or psychologically. When superiors are manipulative and abusive, I'm not talking about sexual abuse here, but if they can be, there is no check upon their power. This happened with Father Martial. There was no check upon his power. And when the visitation finally happened, the Vatican had to realize, oh, what have we done? What have we done? They had a 4th private vow that they got rid of very quickly. And we were told, oh, this is approved by the church. This is approved. They can restructure an entire house into a means of their personal gain. And I've seen this as well. I've seen this numerous times. Turning all the brothers into tools for their own ends. When the common life lacks the balance of friendships and a respect for diversity, a suffocating groupthink can develop, and even well-intentioned brothers can torture each other. This happens when you don't have the balance and the oversight and the mentorship of the whole church. And that's why sometimes it's good that you have people that don't agree so often, but that they're able to have oversight and discussion. It's key why we need the church. Why do we have 30,000 Protestant sects, and among them so many 30,000 Protestant groups, and among them so many very polarized groups, very sectish groups? Because when we destroy the unity of the church, that's what happens. And that's why you have so many crazy Protestant things and mass suicides, because that's the extreme of what happens in these groups when you don't have the church. That's why the church is so important. Bishops, priests, even those that don't agree with us, it is key that we remain united in the church and we work within the church. When a community gives into siege mentality, information is controlled. I experience that. And suffering is isolated and trapped. I experience that. When obedience is misunderstood as overriding the human intellect and freedom of thought, the monk loses his ability to protest even to himself. I experienced that firsthand. I experienced this and so many others. There's a priest, I've interviewed him on my channel. He was a Legionary of Christ with me. He wrote a book, Pathways to Healing, or you can look it up, but he's made some incredible reflections in that book, so I do recommend that people read that. When the natural foundations of grace are not respected, such violence is equated with the will of God and even said to be the path of holiness. That is so true. You know, I've heard in groups saying, look, if you don't do this, you're going to hell. If you don't stay in this group, you'll be condemned, or you'll go to hell and stuff like this. When somebody says, there's a manipulation of conscience, which is abuse. And access to genuine holiness and even contact with God himself is denied when conscience is overridden and encounter with the divine is filtered through those who should be merely companions. This is incredible. And he's so right. When obedience is misunderstood as overriding the human intellect and freedom, the monk loses his ability to protest even to himself. The knowledge is essential to anyone in or considering religious life. Discerners will benefit from knowing the red flags to avoid in communities they visit. This is really important. Buy this book and discern widely. The consecrated in human communities will know how to keep their communities from corruption, and the religious in unhealthy communities will find strength and light for a change. The book is also tailored towards those who left communities over spiritual abuse suffered. The wounded will find in these pages a way to make sense of what they may still be a very confusing and painful time in their lives. And they will find a compassion that will give new hope. Yet to stop there would rob this book of a broader importance. As the Father Rupnik scandal has made painfully clear yet again, even sexual abuse is still a live problem in the church. And let's forget vulnerable adults. This is an area that the church hasn't tackled correctly. But the problem goes deeper. We're dealing with an age of spiritual abuse that most Catholics aren't even aware of. And I've seen this personally in a particular community I don't want to talk about. And I'm just saying that community needed more oversight. That community needed, especially at the level of those managing the community, you need more oversight, more visitation. New communities, any new community looking to be set up needs to have a visitation, an exterior visitation at least once a year. At least once a year, that there needs to be oversight. Okay, you're setting up this community. We need to give you, it's the same as anybody creating a new company. You would look to have audits and oversight and support, because we all. nobody knows everything. And that's why the church is so important. That's why this book has to be read by every bishop in every diocese in the world. There needs to be more discussion of this. It should be part of the synodal discussion process in the church. This has to be spoken about. So anyway, by highlighting victims' testimonies, having tastefully so, he brings alive the deep pain and harm that spiritual abuse causes. Spiritual abuse is real, and we should learn the signs and correct responses to victims, who too often are merely victimized again by pastors, friends, and family they confide in. That's true. That's true. And I've seen it. People that go into monastic life shouldn't have been in there. It's so true. And I wish the church would learn. And by calling out abusive practices and spiritualities and contrasting them with the truth that brings life, the author can purify us of the false notions of well-meaning Catholics and Catholic culture sometimes unwittingly internalize. This is the only path to healing available to us. Sweeping policy changes or unilateral papal action may be necessary. And I think the Pope has taken action, but he's been heavily criticised for that second oversight, that asking Rome to approve a new community. And people have criticised him, not understanding how are you supposed to heal the abuse that has happened over so many years with these so-called new movements. And I point the finger back at the church, at the neo-catechumenal movement. You've created a movement so big that you fail to realise that there is signs of spiritual abuse in that community, especially in how Kiko Arguello used the siege mentality against the very church. The only thing that can save the neo-catechumenal movement is if Pope Benedict dies. That's what he said in front of a packed audience. And the church has instead, hold on a second here. This is the siege mentality. This is a trademark of somebody that is polarizing his movement in a form of spiritual abuse. Pure and simple. Call it out. Doesn't matter how big the movement is. When some of the leaders come out with this type of thing, it creates a siege environment. It also happens in the traditional movement, in the SSPX, and in their splinter groups. It has happened. And if people aren't able to see this, how are we supposed to get healing? That's why it's very important that we remain united in the church. Sometimes people that disagree with us fundamentally on things, and I'm not talking about doctrine here, I'm just talking about how communities are run, or sometimes those are the type of people that because they don't agree, that are probably some of the best advice that you can listen to. Okay, they don't agree, so that now we can, but they can give another point of view, another way of seeing things. I'm just talking about how community is run here. The broad solution to healthier and safer church comes from renewal of our minds and conversion of hearts, most especially at the heart of the church, consecrated men, women and men, but not them alone. Anyway, that was the review that Adam Lucas has given in Crisis magazine, and I haven't managed to get this book. It cost like €80 to post to Ireland, so I've been trying to get it on Amazon, but it's not available in Ireland yet. But I'm sure I'm going to get it soon. But from what I've seen of the review, I'm just they're thinking, yeah, this is what we need. This is what we need. Religious life should be something beautiful, a flower in the church. And good religious communities, like those that, if we look at the example of St. Francis, he wasn't there making a cult of himself. St. Dominic, and others, Saint Ignatius of Loyola, the original the founders. It wasn't one man founded; it was a group of men that founded the Jesuits in Paris. And in today's world, in the church, we desperately need, because over the last 50, 60 years, there's this been phenomenon of this explosion of different communities, small communities that have abused power. Their leaders have abused power, and they've committed abuses in not just the physical, sexual, but abuses in their communities. And we need to know the signs. As simple as we need to, especially when somebody comes along saying, I want to do this community. If a bishop says, okay, you want to found this community, well, I want you to go and live in another community for 2 years. Say somebody wants to found a Benedictine monastery. He wants to found a Benedictine monastery. Well, the bishop says, well, I want you to go and live in this other Benedictine community for 2 years. Just there, because I want to get an assessment from a wider group of people on what you're trying to do. And the so-called charismatic new leader that wants to found says, no, I don't want to go to that community. They don't agree with me, and we have a different charism. We're this, we're that. You should be raising the red flags immediately. Raise the red flags immediately. These so-called leaders that come to the church, that come to bishops wanting to found their community, but it is so specialized that nothing else in the church exists. Hold on a second. I really, really, really think that the church needs to be careful in this area. There needs to be more scrutiny, and we need to know the signs of how we can go off, either on the charismatic side or on the traditional side, because Satan can work in any community really to try and destroy spiritual growth. So anyway, and you know what? This abuse, psychological abuse in communities, destroys people. It destroys them, and I really do think that you could have a whole synod on renewal of religious life, and a whole discussion about this book that Dom Dismas de Lassus has written. You could do a whole synod and synodality just on this. And we would have better communities if we did, and if it was discussed, because the whole Rupnik affair, the whole the Father Marcial affair, there's a few other communities out there that've had the same issues in varying degrees. We need to be very careful. Anyway, that's just my thought on this, and it's just to give encouragement to the church. We make mistakes, we learn, we correct, we reform, and we remain united in the church. And that's why traditional groups, especially in the church, that's why you need the church. Sometimes it's good to have a priest or a bishop or somebody in the church that has a different point of view to challenge what you're doing. Really important. Really important. Anyway, God bless you. Take care. Bye-bye.